Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens. Apologies about that first stream. I've never actually had that issue before, but apparently, I don't know, my mic was disabled or not on the right setting. I'm not quite sure, if I'm being honest. It was an OBS issue, so I'm blaming them. But no, it's definitely my fault. But yeah, let's get on with the news as always, like I said. So the first story we're going to talk today about is obviously all around Daniel Farke's press conference. What is going on with Daniel Farke's press conference? What has he been saying in his press conference? Well, he did a huge update regarding Lukas Nmecha, that he might be involved, so we'll talk about that. He also talked about the Christmas period, what we need to expect through the Christmas period, the squad disciplines, how we're going to get through all that. He also went on to talk a bit, obviously, about the Sunderland preview, so have a look at that, although I have got a Sunderland fan coming on this evening that's going to go out on Christmas Day talking all about the Sunderland game, so we'll sort of save a lot of that talk for then. We're also going to talk a bit about sort of how we looked at the Palace game and the specific game plan and the special game plan that he came up with for that game. Loads of stuff, as I said, to talk about. But unfortunately, because I have got a Sunderland fan coming on and I'm going on their show, we've now got, because of a late start, got about 15 minutes for the show. So apologies for that, but it will be a bit of a fly-through show today. But if you could help the channel as always by dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, it does massively help the channel. But as I said, a bit of a short or so, and apologies if your comments don't get read out today. I am just in a bit of a rush, people. Anyway, let's start with the Lukas Nmecha story, because I think this is the big story coming out of the press conference. And Daniel Farke said there is a small chance he could be involved for Leeds United's game against Sunderland. Now, this is a massive positive. Even if it's just a bench appearance, which you'd expect it to be, we know the impact that Lukas Nmecha can have on this team. We know that Leeds United, when they're at the best, in my personal opinion, I think a lot of you guys have said it as well on the channel, Leeds United are at the best in our opinions, a lot of our opinions, when we're playing two physical strikers up front. Yes, Okafor's been doing a job up there for Leeds United at this moment in time as that sort of small striker to the big number 9 DCL, but it doesn't fundamentally work. I don't think you get the best out of Okafor. I don't think his attributes suit that particular role. I think the role suits best, as I said, when you've got two big men up there and they're working the wonders, which we know Nemetra and Calvert-Lewin, especially in that Chelsea game, were fantastic. But the main thing that I'm looking at with this, to be honest with you, is not just about, as I said, them two playing up front. It's more about he's come back at a very important time. Because yes, I would love DCL and Nemetra to both be fit and both be firing and both be playing every single game, because I think, as I said, I think that's the best way that Leeds United play. But for me personally, it's just nice because I'm looking at the sort of fixtures that we've got coming up in the next few weeks, and we've essentially got about like 4 fixtures in around about, is it like 11, 12 days, something ridiculous like that. And we know Dominic Calvert-Lewin is so important to this team, or a striker like Calvert-Lewin, the physical striker, are so important to this team. And I was getting worried at some points in games, if Nemetra wasn't available, at some point we'd have to go without a big number 9, like we did against Crystal Palace for sort of last 10 minutes, and when Pro came on. And we know that that doesn't really work, and I was worried that was going to happen. So one of the best things about Nemetra hopefully being back fit and firing is that we actually can play him and utilise maybe Dominic Calvert-Lewin against Sunderland, comes off in maybe the 70th, 80th minutes and doesn't have to play 90 minutes in every single game. Because we know with DCL's poor, let's be honest, poor injury record, it hasn't been that poor at Leeds United so far, but overall he has got a poor injury record. We don't want to push it too much with his injuries and make him play 90 on 90 on 90. So at some point there was going to have to be a rotation. And it's nice that now it looks like Nemetra will be able to be that rotation at points. And hopefully when we get out this run, if Nemetra can still stay fit, then we can look at it and go, let's get back to try integrating Nemetra and DCL as your 2 number 9s, if that makes sense. So that's where I'm at with that. Really good news. In terms of other injury news, I'm sure you've all seen it, but both Longstaff and Dan James are out. Not the end of the world for either of them two. For me, though, I am thinking that we need to get Longstaff back as soon as possible. Again, like we talked about with sort of Nemetra and DCL in terms of the DCL's not going to play every single game. It's the same with the midfield. Realistically, we're going to need a bit of rotation in the midfield, and I would rather the rotation be Longstaff than Gruev. So ideally, if Longstaff can get back in the next sort of week or so, and be able to at least make bench appearances in some of these games coming up. Maybe he don't make the Sunderland game. He obviously isn't going to make the Sunderland game. But after that, we've got Anfield away. Then we've got Man United at home. You'd hope in some of them games, maybe that Longstaff could feature. He did say he was back training on the grass in the last press conference going in to the Palace game. So hope that's what I said then. And I think that's the hope regarding Longstaff. But that's the situation with him. And obviously Dan James is out as well. But I don't think in the current climate of how Leeds United are trying to play, Dan James being out is like massively influential in the squad. Yes, we want everyone fit, of course we do. But I don't think it's totally influential, as I think like a Nemetra coming back is potentially. Anyway, he then went on to talk a bit about the Christmas period and sort of how Leeds United are going to juggle the Christmas period. And for the first time, he said since he was the Leeds United manager, and actually since he'd ever managed in England, he is actually going to give himself and Christmas Day off. And then they talked about, well, if you're going to give the players Christmas Day off, does that mean that they're going to be eating loads of Christmas turkey, getting really fat, and we're going to have an overweight team going into the Sunderland game? And he basically said, look, a lot of these players now, I trust them. The massive on discipline and what they do off the pitch and what they eat. A lot of them have got private chefs, so I'm not particularly worried about that. So I think that's a nice, again, which shows the professionalism, should I say, in the Leeds United squad, which I think is a real positive. Then something I want to mention as well is around the sort of what I mentioned regarding the Palace game. Because obviously the Palace game was fantastic for Leeds United. We've talked a lot about on this channel the benefit it's given us in terms of league position. But what I found really interesting, and I feel almost vindicated from what I've been saying on this channel, and you guys that obviously watch week in, week out will know this. I basically suggested that in possession, Leeds United went to a sort of 4-3-3 against Crystal Palace. And out of possession, they're back into the 5, but in possession, they're in a 4 at the back. And obviously, a lot, as I said, majority of you guys on the YouTube channel were very we were, I think, on the YouTube channel for the most part, we're all very sort of understanding of where we're at. But on TikTok, I must admit, I got quite a bit of hate for that, saying you don't know what you're on about. And I felt quite vindicated because actually in Daniel Farke's press conference today, he said that, look, for the Crystal Palace game, we came up with a special match plan, which was a 5 at the back out of possession and then a 4 at the back in possession. And I think you saw that with obviously Rodon coming further up the pitch. And I actually think we start to see Rodon progress up the pitch in the last few games, really. It's not just been the sort of the Crystal Palace time that the first do it. I think against Brentford especially, we started to see the sort of marauding runs from Rodon but he was still starting in a more centre-back position than right-back position like we saw against Palace. But I think we saw the start of Rodon obviously progressing up the pitch and being more involved in the attack, I guess. And obviously that was just progressed to another level against Palace. And actually, as I said, we ended up building out in a sort of 4 at the back, which I think, as I said, a lot of us on this channel knew. But it was nice to feel like that was done. And it's also nice as well that I think we're getting to a point now with Daniel Farke where something I've talked about massive on this channel, and when we were talking about when Daniel Farke maybe should be removed from his post at some point, and if that was a good idea or not. Obviously, you guys know I never actually fully wanted him gone. But one thing I did say if a new manager came in was, I want a new manager to come in who comes up with individual match plans for individual games. Because I think fundamentally the best way to stay up in this league when you're a newly promoted team or when you're not one of the best teams is to don't have your own way of playing. Obviously have a style to an extent, but adapt it game by game depending on the opposition and sort of try and neutralise their best points and sort of take advantage of their weak points. And I think that's the way that Leeds United should go about it. Individual match plans per game. And I think what we're seeing at this moment in time, and we saw it as the first time against Palace, really, was an individual match plan for an individual game. And this gives me real confidence for what's to go forward for Leeds United. And when actually Daniel Farke was talking about the individual match plan that we saw in the Palace game, he actually went on to say that in the Sunderland game, expect another, it won't be the same individual match plan because obviously Sunderland play a different way, but it will be another individual match plan. And then I was thinking back to obviously when the Forest games and the Brighton games, when it was all down in the dumps and we were playing really poorly and we weren't doing what we were on about on this channel. We weren't adapting game by game. And I was thinking, why has he done that? And then it took me back to something he'd said in the press conference earlier, which was that one of the things he doesn't want to do when he comes up with these individual match plans is, yes, there might be a perfect match plan, which if you execute it perfectly against, say, Sunderland at the weekend, on a tactical basis, you'll just completely batter them. But one thing that Daniel Farke said, which I think is really important and I think is really interesting, is sometimes you want to, yes, you've got a perfect match plan, he was basically saying, but sometimes you don't want to go to that extreme because you don't want to over-confuse the players and make the plan over-complicated to the point where they can't actually execute it on the pitch. And I think this is opens up a really interesting idea. And I almost wish we had a bit more time to talk about this than we do tonight. But I think this is interesting in terms of when we're on about individual match plans, like I said, how much of that depends on how much time you've got on the training pitch if you're playing 2 games a week or 1 game a week. And how much does that depend on the level of quality of player that can actually impose a match plan and, as I said, execute a match plan? And how far do you want to push it? Because then I look back to obviously the Forest and the Brighton game, and I think potentially, wrongly, admittedly, but I think potentially one of the reasons why in them particular games we had a very similar match plan is because I think at that point he didn't want to overcomplicate the players with new match plans for individual battles. Now, it didn't work because we lost them games anyway. But I think that's why he's done it. And I think now, when we've got to a point where Leeds United are in a more comfortable position and Leeds United are in a better position and everybody knows their roles a bit more in the 4-3-3 and the 3-5-2 now, we can start looking at more individual match plans. So what I think now, going forward, is we're going to see Leeds United implement more match plans per game and more individual match plans going forward. And as I said, for me, that's the way Leeds United should be playing. And I think that's a huge positive. But I thought it was interesting that he made that comment because, as I said, we talk on this channel all the time like we're tacticians, but we never actually put it into principle and try to execute a match plan. We just say this might work. But sometimes, obviously, yes, a plan will be really good. But if the players can't execute on the pitch effectively, then there's no point having the match plan because it's all about results in the end. It's all about the players being able to execute the game plan in the best possible way. And I just thought that was a really interesting comment, so I thought I'd bring it up to you guys. It's kind of obvious, but it's one of them things maybe you don't always think about when you're looking at sort of a tactical basis, that how extreme do you want to go with it, because you don't want to confuse the players too much, especially when we're playing a lot of games like we are in this period, I guess. Anyway, that's all about that. Then he talked a bit about the January transfer window. And he's basically got his line at the moment, Daniel Farke, with the January transfer window. And we'll start with the sales conversation, because that's sort of what he got asked today about. He basically got asked about Illan Meslier. And he basically said, and we've heard him tone this line with Joe Perreault in recent weeks, now he's doing it with Meslier. The line is, if anyone wants to know, all the players are in my plans. And the only way that situation will change with a player not being in my plans is if they ask to leave the football club. And I think when you look at sort of what Daniel Farke has been like in terms of selling players, I think this has been his policy no matter what, really. I think there's two reasons that Leeds United sell players at the football club. Number one, if the player actually asks to leave the football club, like we saw with Mateo Joseph in the summer, like we've seen, I think we've seen with another player, I can't think off the top of my head. But this is one of the ways that players leave, which is obviously Daniel Farke saying, look, if you want to leave, tell me you want to leave, and you can do. And the other way we see players leave, I think, is when the club make their mind up and they basically get an offer to the point where it's almost, just because of the financial situation, hard to reject. And you look at sort of when we sold Archie Gray, I think it was obviously a club sale. Somerville, club sale. Rutter, there was obviously a release clause there. Then we had Kamara, I think, club sale as well. So I think fundamentally Daniel Farke has got these players that he's happy with to an extent. I think he obviously wants to add to the squad. But in the same regard, I think part of the whole ethos of the football club is that, look, if you want to be here, you will be in my plans unless you tell me otherwise. If you tell me otherwise, you will leave the football club. That you don't want me in my plans, of course. And, of course, at points, we're going to have to balance the books, which is what we talked about yesterday in terms of likes of maybe Jayden Bogle moving on, or a Tanaka, or a Strauch, or one of these PSR players at some point having to leave the football club for Leeds United in order for Leeds United to play a trade. But I thought that was interesting, the way he looks at it. But, yeah, I fundamentally, though, Meslier in January, I think we're hoping he probably does leave. And I think, again, if the club get a good offer, they probably will take it. It's just going to be about if a offer comes in for him, really, because obviously we know he can leave for free in the summer. So will Leeds United look at doing that, or will other clubs look at doing that when they know they can get him in 6 months for free? I'm not so sure. And the final thing he said was a bit about Ethan Ampadu. And he basically said, which I thought was quite interesting, he said, and I think I sort of knew this anyway, and I think you could, if you listen to Daniel Farke a lot, which obviously I do doing this, this is quite apparent, but he basically said Ampadu is one of, if not the most important player in the team. And I think that Ampadu is one of them players in the Leeds United team at this moment who, if they are fit, they play no matter what. I think if they're 50% fit, they play no matter what. And I think Ampadu is the Daniel Farke on the pitch, in my personal opinion. I think you always have at football clubs the sort of manager on the pitch, and usually obviously it goes in the form of the captain. And I think that's what Ampadu is to Daniel Farke. As I said, I think he is Daniel Farke's most important player. I think that's what Daniel Farke thinks anyway. We can debate in the comments after this video, obviously, if that is actually the case and we think Ampadu is the most important player. But I think on a leadership standpoint, he definitely is. But what's interesting about him is he's quite a young captain still, and obviously Daniel Farke talked about this today in terms of the fact that he's still only 25 years old. But I think that's because obviously he came through at Exeter at like 16 years old. So he's actually been playing professional football for about 9 years, even though he's 25, which I think is why he's such a mature 25-year-old and obviously why he's been the club captain for a couple of years now. But I think, as I said, I always stand on this hill. I think Ethan Ampadu is massively important to the Leeds United team. Yes, I think he's playing really well at this moment, and he's in a good phase in terms of his own performance levels. But I will never underestimate his ability to captain the team to a really high level. In my opinion, I think he's comfortably the best captain at the football club, and I think you see that in every sort of vein of his of time at Leeds United. I think he's constantly showing to be a fantastic captain, and I think his leadership is just getting better and better. And actually, this is something that Daniel Farke said. That, as I said, Daniel Farke said, look, because he's a young captain, we actually are seeing sort of increases in his level of captaincy day by day almost, and I think that's a real positive, because I think this is someone who can be at the football club for a long time. And when we talk about potentially some players are going to have to move on at some point and leave the football club, I think you're looking at Ampadu, and I think he's here for the long haul, and I think he's someone that hopefully if Leeds United can stay in this division this year, and we're looking at sort of progressing, maybe next year get maybe 13th, the year after maybe 10th, the year after maybe 7th, maybe getting to Europe. I think Ethan Ampadu will be part of that journey for us. I really do. He's progressed from the Championship to the Premier League now. I think he will continue to get better as a player, better as a captain, and I think he will be with Leeds United for the future. And I think there's not many players in the team you can say that about, but especially when Daniel Farke's the manager, I think he will be a cog in this Leeds United time for years to come, especially at the age he's at. I think that's really important. The only slight concern I've got about him, and this is probably a conversation for a longer period of time, is because he started so young as a footballer, sometimes when you've been playing from 16 years old, it catches up with you later on. So you peak at maybe 25 rather than peaking at 28, and you actually end up retiring early. But this obviously is a conversation for later down the line with Ampadu. But that's the only thing I do worry about. He's played a lot of football for someone of his age, and sometimes that does catch up with, like obviously it caught with Wayne Rooney. But I would imagine Ethan Ampadu is much more disciplined with his sort of diet and everything he does off the pitch than maybe Wayne Rooney was. But yeah, as I said, a huge positive that Ampadu's playing well, because he's going to be playing every game anyway. So let's hope he does continue to play well. Anyway, sorry for the short show today. Hope you enjoyed it as always. I will see you tomorrow. I do think I'm going to do a stream tomorrow. I'll let you know on a post if I'm not going to. But I'm going to a neighbour's party tomorrow. So I'm hoping to... sounds a bit sad actually. But I'm hoping to go to the neighbour's party, come back for 8 p.m, do my stream, and then go again. So I don't know if that's going to work. But that's my plan. Anyway, and then obviously we've got... something coming out on Christmas Day as well, which is almost like a preview, talking with a Sunderland fan about where both clubs are. It's not just a preview, we're going to get into a bit more detail than that. But I hope you enjoy that and look out for that. Anyway, I shall see you later, everybody. Bye for now. Bye for